Yeah, welcome everyone to our healthcare information session. So I see that we have over 270 now people in the audience, and thank you everyone for taking the time to meet and discuss with us. So just a little bit about myself. My name is Yan Song. So I will be the moderator for this information session. So I am vice president at AG in our Boston office, and I've been working at AG for almost 10 years now. My training was in epidemiology and medicine. And at AG, I primarily focus on various types of HEOR studies. So I'm very glad to be the moderator of this information session. Looking forward to sharing information about AG with you. So I think maybe, Melina, let's go to the agenda. Yeah. So I will quickly talk about the flow of today's event. So first of all, we will do a quick round of introduction of our panelists. And then I will spend probably 1 to 2 minutes just to very quickly introduce AG's healthcare practice. And after that, we will invite each panelist to give us an overview and some interesting case examples about each of the 6 primary research types in healthcare at AG. And like Melina mentioned at the end, we'll leave about 15 minutes to take questions from the audience. Great, so let's move to the, great. So Moral, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Maral Der Sarkisian. I'm a vice president in AG's Los Angeles office. I was trained in epidemiology at UCLA. I received my PhD from UCLA's Fielding School of Public Health and joined AG immediately afterwards. So I've been here for about 9.5 years now. Looking forward to today's discussion.
And then Atam?
Great. Hi, my name is Atan Gilika. I'm a vice president in our Boston office. I've been with AG for a little over 11 years now. I work primarily in our healthcare litigation practice, and I joined the firm as an analyst straight out of undergrad.
Debbie?
Hi, everyone. My name is Debbie Goldschmidt. In terms of background, I have a BA in math from UPenn and a PhD in economics from Boston University. I'm a vice president in the New York office of AG, focusing on HEOR studies. I started as an associate and have been here for about 8.5 years. And I've had 2 kids while I've been at AG, so it's possible to have a family and some work-life balance, even in consulting.
Great. Thank you, Debbie. Kelly?
Hi, everyone. My name is Kale Chauvin. I'm a manager here in AG's Boston office. My background is in epidemiology and biostatistics. I got a Doctor of Science degree in epidemiology from Harvard University. I've been at AG almost 5 years, and my work has been really diverse. I've been grateful for opportunities to work in HEOR, as Nan has described, and also do a little healthcare litigation in my earlier years, as well as participate in or contributing to some regulatory works earlier and now. In addition to the work I do at AG, I'm an adjunct lecturer at the Harvard School of Public Health, where I teach a graduate level course on analytical methods for epidemiology. No kids yet, but so there is work-life balance there, but there's also opportunities to work in academia and participate that way too, in addition to consulting.
Great, thank you, Kelly. Last but not least, Kai.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kai Wu. I am a manager here in the Menlo Park office. I've been with the firm since January 2017. I joined as a senior analyst. By training, I studied computational systems biology, undergrad, and then biomedical engineering, graduate school at UCLA. Shortly before joining AG, I've done positions at one of the Nature journals and then at a biotech hedge fund. And then at AG, I work primarily in the healthcare strategy practice. Looking forward to sharing my experiences with everyone.
Great, thank you, Kai. Let's move to the next. Oh, thank you. So I'll just give a very quick introduction or description of AG's healthcare practice. So I know most of you in the audience may already have some knowledge regarding AG. So today we'll just focus on the healthcare practice area, which I would say is a pretty unique practice area among all the economic consulting companies. So we have a very large healthcare practice with over 350 consultants working in this area. On the HEOR side, we partner with a lot of the leading healthcare organizations, such as the large global pharmaceutical companies and the biotech companies, major health outcome issues in different therapeutic areas. Let's move to the next slide. Maybe the next one. Thank you. So yeah, I think in the past few years, the scope of HEOR or healthcare research more broadly, it just become broader and broader. So if we think from the perspective of the life cycle of a medical product, HEOR and the healthcare practice can essentially play a role throughout the entire cycle of the novel development of a novel pharmaceutical product. So here we listed some example study types that we usually conduct that correspond to each developmental phase of a novel pharmaceutical product. I will not go into the details here, and we will learn more from our panelists about some of these examples. Go to the next slide. Great. So here we listed some key healthcare research types, including regulatory and epidemiology support, and also primary data collection, secondary database analyses, economic modeling. We'll also talk about market access and payer strategy, healthcare litigation. And beyond these cases, I want to say that AG is also very active in engaging in pro bono research. So this includes both projects on litigation side as well as the healthcare side. We will also talk about some of our example works in the pro bono area. So great. So let's now we'll have some in-depth discussion from our panelists to discuss each of these research types in more detail. So maybe Moral, would you like us to kick us off with the regulatory and epi work?
Sure, thanks, Yan. So as Yan mentioned, I do quite a bit of work in regulatory real-world evidence and pharmacoepidemiology, which I will talk about as well. So these are both very exciting areas of research to be in at the moment, especially with training in epidemiology. And that's because these are opportunities to practice real, or, you know, a lot of us get into epidemiology and public health in order to make a difference in patients' lives. And this is an active, actual way that we can make differences in patients' lives by helping bring drugs to market or helping to assess the safety of drugs once they're on the market. And so this is, I think of this kind of like two sides of the same coin almost. So regulatory real-world evidence, we conduct real-world studies to assist with the development of regulatory strategy that helps accelerate the drug approval process, meaning pharmaceutical companies or biotech companies are able to bring their drugs to market faster by using real-world data to either benchmark their clinical trial findings, contextualize them, or provide standard of care comparisons to single-arm trials that don't have a head-to-head comparison or like a placebo arm for reasons such as equipoise or, you know, practical reasons where standard of care, there isn't an established standard of care. So in this space, we provide clients with support by attending FDA meetings in addition to helping them develop their regulatory strategies. And we've been involved in a very large number of these cases over the past 5 years. And most importantly, we've had successes in these areas. So AG has actively contributed to the success of these company strategies to help bring these drugs to market. And I've provided 2 examples here. The first is for Exkivity, which was for EGFR exon 20 insertion mutation, mutated non-small cell lung cancer. And this was the first and only approved oral targeted therapy specifically designed to treat EGFR exon 20 mutated NSCLC. So this is somewhere where, you know, we had an impact on helping bring this treatment to patients, helping patients access this treatment. The second example is actually in the EU. So not only do we provide regulatory support in the United States, but we also provide support in the EU. And this was a study where a real world data that we generated, real world evidence, was used to support Blueprint Medicine in expanding the label and expanding the indication of Ivacat avapritinib to advanced systemic mastocytosis. Can we go to the next slide? In addition, we do numerous studies in drug safety. So as you may be aware, the FDA and EMA will often have post-authorization safety studies or post-marketing commitment. They'll have requirements of pharmaceutical companies, biotech companies, to make sure that they're assessing the safety of drugs once they're on the market. And we have many examples of these types of studies. I've provided 3 of them here. One of the most pertinent is the fact that Analysis Group supported Pfizer in safety surveillance of their COVID-19 vaccine. And so that is something that we have recently worked on. That is something that we have published. It's in the public domain. We presented an abstract on it for 2 years, last year and this year, at the International Conference for Pharmacoepidemiology. And we've also done studies on pharmacoepidemiology on drug safety that have been published that have had impacts on the FDA or the EMA's decision making. So these were studies that either the FDA mandated or that the sponsor voluntarily conducted that were then submitted to the FDA. And these are all published in order to demonstrate the safety of these drugs, in order to make patients and physicians more confident in the fact that they can be used without adverse side effects.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Moral. So next, Debbie will talk about some examples in primary data collection studies. Debbie?
Sure. So in the HEOR space, or health economics and outcomes research, we do many different types of research studies to support our clients and answer really all types of questions about the burden of disease, real-world effectiveness, societal burden, cost effectiveness, and really anything else you can think of. To answer all these questions, we use a wide range of data sources. So I'm going to talk briefly about primary data sources we use. So when there's no existing or pre-established data that will best answer the question. And then I'll turn it over to my colleague Kelly to talk about secondary database studies. But in terms of primary data, we have done surveys of patients, caregivers, physicians, and the general public. We conduct chart review studies. And so for those, we design a data collection form and then work with doctors and medical centers to fill it out based on the information in your patient's charts. There's several flavors of chart reviews that are listed here, and they vary mostly in how we're recruiting the doctors and medical centers for their participation. We also have done one-on-one interviews, again, with patients, caregivers, physicians, and that's really helpful when we want to get in-depth information from them. I've also listed a few methodologies here. So a discrete choice experiment, which is a survey method to better understand how people value different characteristics of a treatment or other type of product or choice. An advisory board or ad board, Delphi panel, those are techniques for getting information from or reaching consensus from a group of experts. And so in terms of, what does an associate do on these types of projects? Really, it's everything. They help prepare study documents like protocols, survey instruments. They work with the vendors and medical centers. They'll help with monitoring the data collection, and then they'll help design the analyses and work closely with analysts to oversee, and then often work directly on the analyses. And a lot of times they'll also help with the client communication part of it. So next I wanted to share a kind of fun, interesting example of one study that I worked on. And so the client was interested in assessing the overall burden of tardive dyskinesia, or TD, which is this disorder that causes involuntary movements of the face, especially lips and mouth, extremities, like your arms and legs. And it often happens after patients have used antipsychotic treatments. And so there are a lot of other studies assessing healthcare costs and other aspects of the impact of TD. But for this one, we really wanted to think more broadly about how TD could affect patients and their lives in different ways. So we worked with the client to come up with an experiment. It was a survey of the general public, and we wanted to get their thoughts on how they would view somebody with TD in different situations, social situations, like at a job, in friendships, and in dating. And so the issue is that many people aren't familiar with TD, so just describing it in words doesn't really capture the full effect. So we worked with the vendor to make videos that show what TD looks like. So we worked with this vendor to recruit actors, reviewed their audition videos, provided feedback, We wrote scripts for little scenes for them to act out, and then used all of that to put together videos that were embedded in the survey. And so in each of these videos, an actor was talking to the camera and basically giving like a 2 to 3 minute monologue that related to a social situation, like a job interview or a new date. The actor would do it in 2 ways. So one where they depicted the movements of TD and one without, and everything else in the video stayed the same. The actor's clothes and appearance, the set, the script, and nothing else changed. So then when we administered the survey to the general public, each survey respondent saw just one of these videos and answered a few questions about what they saw. We were then able to compare the results between people who saw the videos that showed the TD movements and those who saw the videos without. And so here we show a little snippet of the results from the dating scenario. You can see that people who saw the actor simulating TD symptoms were less likely to be interested in meeting them in person or wanting to keep talk to them. We also included questions where we didn't expect TD to have an impact, like about the person's clothes, and we see that there's not really a difference there. So this is just one example where we came up with a creative way to get the data we need to best answer the client's research question. We're not just using sort of set data sets, we're really thinking outside of the box and trying to answer as best we can. Now turn it over to Kelly.
Sorry, thank you. I had some difficulties. So thank you, Debbie. I'm happy to discuss secondary database studies, and what we're trying to illustrate here is how we leverage secondary databases to inform how we address research questions here at AG. So by secondary data, what we really mean when we're thinking about that concept is any data that is collected by another person or is collected that is not for some primary use, as Debbie had discussed. And a few commonly used secondary database studies include claim studies, electronic medical record studies, and registry studies. And then I've generalized that to also say, in addition to secondary databases, we can think of leveraging secondary data sources as well to inform other project types that we conduct at AG, namely systematic literature reviews, meta-analyses, and indirect treatment comparisons. And as you can see below this, I've included just a few publications that have leveraged secondary databases or secondary data sources to answer really important and poignant research questions. One is looking at the work that we did to sort of understand the global carbon footprint of asthma inhalers and how policy shifts could help inform reductions in remissions and disability-adjusted life years at a global level. And for this study, we leveraged a wide range of secondary data sources, including prescription data that informed us on costs for current asthma inhalers, carbon emissions data from published literature, economic data from the World Health Organization, and all of that allowed us to simulate policy changes to understand what would happen if we shifted from the status quo reliance on current asthma inhalers, which have a very high carbon footprint. They're known as metered dose inhalers, to something known as dry powder inhalers, which have a significantly lower carbon footprint, and what that impact would be globally across high income and all the way to low income countries, and how expensive that would be to inform how policymakers and decision makers think about asthma care and the carbon footprint associated with that care. In addition, we've also used these secondary data sources to conduct studies to sort of understand heterogeneity in patient populations. One was using a claims database and unsupervised machine learning to identify distinct patient profiles among patients who had CRS, WNP, or chronic sinusitis with nasal polyps, to first identify these patients in these databases using unsupervised machine learning, and then understand costs and healthcare research utilizations, which we term as economic burden associated with this population. And then, of course, you can also use secondary database studies to answer research questions just related to drugs, the effectiveness of drugs, or the association between different therapeutics and outcomes. Here we looked at whether or not stimulant medications versus non-stimulant medications were associated with an increased risk of suicidal ideation and attempts in individuals with ADHD using claims data. Another way we've leveraged secondary database studies to inform clinical practice or say something about an important and evolving area of concern is as it relates to antibiotic resistance or antimicrobial resistance. And here we use electronic health record data and machine learning, then translated to predictive modeling to identify patients who were at highest risk for antimicrobial resistance, or AMR, based on treatment with 4 commonly used antibiotics for uncomplicated urinary tract infections. What was interesting about this study is that we were able to collaborate across multiple stakeholders. So for this work, AG collaborated with several clinicians and experts in infectious disease. We also did our own in-house collaborations with our data science team, where we sort of conducted the machine learning analyses, built these models, which tell you what your predicted probability of antimicrobial resistance is, and then worked with clinicians to translate these models into categories of risk. And here you'll see that there are 3, here you see you could be high, moderate, or low risk. After we did that and are publishing that work, our data science team built an online visualization tool where clinicians, patients, anyone who was interested could go online, see our model, put in different values for the predictors identified by our models, and get a predictor probability and a risk categorization. And this risk categorization framework of you being high, moderate, or low risk was something novel that hadn't been really done in UTI before, and was informed by machine learning and clinical validation. And so these are just a few examples of how we leverage secondary databases and secondary data sources to answer important research questions that advance the field of public health and move the needle on how we think about health or the effectiveness of drugs, or even things as important as climate change.
Great, thank you, Kelly. So next, I will talk about the projects related to pharmacoeconomic modeling. So I think among all the project types, this kind of projects, essentially pharmacoeconomic modeling, is one important type that's routinely being conducted here at AG. Many of these studies are really high-stake projects that's crucial for supporting a successful market access of new pharmaceutical products from our clients. So we work with our pharma clients to develop various types of our pharmacoeconomic models to evaluate novel technologies. So these models are used in different settings. You can see from the figure to the left-hand side. So with the most important one being HTA, or Health Technology Assessment setting. So this is a mandatory step in many countries for a new drug to be included in the national or private insurance formulary. Of course, there are other purposes for this type of projects, including for payer discussion, for the client to generate some internal pricing strategy, and also just as general HEOR research topics. So among all these different modeling types, there are 2 types of models that are the most commonly seen in HEOR, each measuring a very important aspects of a novel medical product. So the first one is called budget impact analysis, BIA. So this type of model answers the affordability question. So essentially, what is the financial consequences of adoption and diffusion of a new health technology within a specific healthcare system or insurance plan? Usually this kind of analysis is required before the formulary approval or reimbursement decisions. So the second important type of models is a cost effectiveness analysis, or CEA. And this one, on the other hand, answers the value for money question. So, which is a much more complex research question. So this type of model usually uses the different types and sometimes very complex decision modeling techniques to model the outcomes related to different treatment decisions. So it can help the decision makers like providers or third-party payers or HTA bodies to quantify the economic value of a different competing interventions and select the treatment which maximize the value for money. Here at the bottom of the slide, I provided one recent example that we published recently. So this is the cost effectiveness analysis that evaluated Wegovy, or semaglutide, for the treatment of obesity in the US. Probably many of you probably have heard about this drug from different media sources recently. So essentially, in this study, we used a Markovian structure with, as you can see, many health states to project the short-term and long-term implications related to obesity. And then we can track the different outcomes and also the cost associated with different treatment options for obesity. Great, let's move to the next slide. Great, so Kai, would you like to talk about the qualitative research?
Certainly, thank you, Jan. Yeah, so I work primarily on qualitative healthcare strategy work here at Analysis Group, and this consists primarily of literature reviews, formulary dossiers, disease education materials, and HEOR evidence communication materials. You might be wondering, like, for a lot of the work that my colleagues have mentioned, the primary and secondary HEOR research, what ends up happening to a lot of that research. One avenue is it does get published and become part of the public domain. The other aspect of it is that the distillation of results from those studies generally get put into what are called formulary dossiers. And these are basically the archives of information about the burden of illness, the efficacy and safety profile of the drug at hand, and then the target indication for said drug that's generally directed to a payer audience to help them make informed decisions on whether or not to reimburse for a particular therapy, and if to reimburse, how much to reimburse. The types of roles that associates would typically have on these projects, they basically cover the full gamut of roles and responsibilities. They could be managing the development of the deliverables or working on them themselves. They could be reviewing the draft deliverables. They liaise with the clients. And then they also oversee or conduct the data synthesis themselves, along with generating key insights that will be used by our clients. Next slide. So just as an example study, why do we do these strategic literature reviews? For a lot of our clients, they are dealing with situations where they have a limited set of resources and they want to understand how to get best bang for buck, essentially, for future research projects. So what we typically recommend to a lot of our clients is to do a targeted literature review. In this case, this specific project was for a company working in a rare hematologic malignancy. And if you don't know what the evidence landscape looks like, certainly you can conduct various types of projects without having a good grasp of the evidence landscape. But moving forward in that way, you might end up conducting projects that are not necessarily the best impact or the most novel or meaningful results for your particular product. And you might also miss potential opportunities just simply due to blind spots. So what we've done for this particular client is they wanted to understand the evidence landscape for this particular rare hematologic malignancy. You make a small upfront investment to then understand what the evidence landscape looks like. And then you use that information to then inform subsequent decision-making for which projects to prioritize for evidence generation in the future. For this particular client, we also did a systematic literature review, again, more on a strategic basis to help them communicate with one of the regulatory agencies. And in this particular case, the systematic literature review was recommended as when you are conducting a targeted literature review, there's oftentimes going to be this perception of bias with the work and the perception that the work is not methodologically rigorous or reproducible. But when you approach external parties like a regulatory agency with a systematic literature review, the perception of bias is much lower. The methodological rigor associated with this process is a lot higher. And it really helps set the stage to have a more receptive discussion with an external stakeholder who may be potentially skeptical of your product or the potential value or the potential concerns that may be associated with this product, which in this case it was risk of second malignancies associated with various treatments in the space.
Great, thank you, Kai. Next, we would like to invite Moral to talk about the pro bono projects we have in healthcare. Moral, I think you're on mute. Okay, good.
Yes, thank you, Yan. So AG is involved in quite a bit of pro bono work, and that's actually really important to our firm. And the breadth of our pro bono work is quite extensive. So our pro bono work is focused in Haiti, the United States specifically, and then also within Africa. So some of the types of organizations that we're involved with and some of the types of projects that we do include studying the impact of political asylum or immigration representation, project legal services on asylum seekers. We have partnered with the Massachusetts Housing and Shelter Alliance to analyze health impacts of social services, and we've supported Harvard Medical School's faculty efforts to assess drug-resistant tuberculosis strains. We've also adapted a COVID-19 risk assessment tool to assist with the Canadian government's pandemic response planning in Quebec. So now I'd like to talk about just one example in a little bit more detail around kind of the pro bono work that we do. And this is a pro bono project with Compañeros en Salud, which is an NGO partner organization of Partners in Health, which Partners in Health is based out of Harvard Medical School, and they do a lot of work in Haiti. So this is a survey project, and the data come from community health workers who are implementing the Partners in Health household model of care. So historically, in countries like Malawi or Liberia, Partners in Health had taken a vertical care approach by assigning community health workers to individual patients with specific conditions to provide one-on-one psychosocial and treatment support. But shifting the community health workers focused to entire households would allow for further access to care for a wider variety of conditions in a larger number of age groups. So the objectives of community health workers in their communities are to proactively screen and detect pregnancies and other conditions, refer or physically accompany individuals to receive care at primary, secondary, or tertiary levels, closely follow up on specific conditions like diabetes, hypertension, pregnancy, diarrhea and malnutrition in young children, and provide basic treatment and prevention of other conditions at home, free of charge. So if you could press enter again to get, thank you. So AG's objectives in this specific project were to run a pilot to understand the community health worker visits and what was going on there, the health indicators in the communities where this pilot was being run. And the objectives were to understand what impact does this model, this household model of care, have on the communities where it's being implemented. Is this model performing well? Is it meeting key process indicator goals? How prevalent are diabetes and hypertension in the communities that are served? And to look at kind of in general, what is the health in these communities? And so I've presented some of the results here. Among a total of 336 visits that were made by the community health workers, they had recorded blood glucose levels for 69%, and 69% had a blood glucose level that was outside of the normal range. So they are being able to actually identify patients who have diabetes or have health conditions that should be followed up on. They were also able to monitor tuberculosis vaccination rates to be between 70 to 80%, which is pretty good. But because of this pilot that was done, because of this survey that was done, they identified one community that had a low vaccination rate that could then be targeted for further intervention. So this is just one example of a pro bono project that we do. So this was evaluating that household model of care that I mentioned. But we have several other, types of pro bono projects that we do, as I mentioned previously. And I just wanted to open it up to the rest of the panel in case anybody else has anything to add on the pro bono work that we do. All right. So that'll cover it.
Great. Thank you, Maral. So next, we will have a time to talk about healthcare litigation.
Great, thanks, Jan. So litigation is a large part of our work at AG, in particular within healthcare. We support our clients through various aspects of litigation or dispute, all the way from kind of, pre-litigation, kind of supporting them through kind of investigations, through the litigation process, and ultimately with trial if the case goes that far. So on the slide is just a sampling of a whole host of kind of cases that we work on. This is by no means an exhaustive list, but it's really kind of a broad list of kind of areas that we work in. A fair number of our cases are, through the government, on behalf of the government. There are cases that are kind of disputes between kind of, individuals and businesses, and businesses, pharmaceutical companies, hospitals, etc. But really kind of a large share of our work is kind of on behalf of a dispute involving the government. There are a few laws that kind of encourage individuals to speak up when they suspect that there is fraud being perpetrated on the government. And so the government is a large purchaser of healthcare services through various government programs like Medicare and Medicaid. And so the government encourages individuals, people in businesses, people in hospitals, etc., if they suspect that there is some wrongdoing that is being perpetrated on the government, someone's lying about services that were provided and the government's paying for services that were not provided, the government encourages people to speak up, and so a lot of our cases are within that realm. And just to kind of give you a flavor of a case that I worked on a few years ago that involves kind of a case that was brought forth on behalf of the government, and the types of things that we would typically kind of work on within the context of the case. This was a case that involved a colorectal cancer screening test, an at-home test. And so your doctor, anyone over the age of kind of 45, it's recommended that you get routine cancer screening for colorectal cancer. It can happen kind of within the hospital. It's pretty invasive. You have to undergo anesthesia. More recently, there are tests that can be kind of shipped to you at home, and you can kind of take the test within the comfort of your own home. And historically, the government has taken the position that for any medical service, it's against the law. There's a law that precludes any gifts or benefits or anything of value to be given to a patient, to a physician, etc., that encourages them to partake in a particular healthcare service. In this particular case, cancer screening generally has a very low adherence rate. Even though cancer can be serious, people are prescribed cancer screening tests and don't show up for the test. And in this particular case, if a patient hadn't showed up for the test or hadn't taken this at-home test after 6 months or a year, they received a gift card to encourage them to take the test. And so someone brought a case on behalf of the government saying, well, that's wrong. You shouldn't be giving people gift cards to take this test. And we supported several experts within the context of this case to demonstrate that in this particular case, giving people gift cards to take this test made sense because screening is good, preventative care is good, and in the long run, it saves the government money. And if you find out that your patients have cancer sooner rather than later, it's generally better outcomes in the long term. The government isn't spending as much money treating these patients because cancer is caught earlier. We supported 3 experts, a physician who kind of told the story of kind of cancer more generally and why it's a serious condition, an economist who quantified what it costs the government to pay for these tests by patients that receive gift cards, but ultimately what the government saved in long-term care costs. And that second number was much larger than what they spent on the tests. And then we supported a healthcare marketing expert who just told the story of the importance of nudging patients because patients procrastinate. They don't always do what physicians tell them to do, and the importance of kind of encouraging patients to do the right thing. And ultimately, the case involved kind of, a lot of data work, kind of crunching numbers to understand what the cost of care is, to kind of research, understanding what, kind of qualitatively, what cancer is all about, what the issue with patient adherence to tests is. So lots of qualitative research, a lot of quantitative work. Ultimately, the case wound up favorable for our client. The government issued an advisory that in this particular case, when it involves preventative care, they don't see an issue. And they cited the example of kind of COVID vaccination, that during COVID, there was kind of widespread use of gift cards to encourage patients to get vaccinated because of the importance of preventing severe disease. And so through demonstrating the importance of preventative care and the cost savings to the government, we're able to tell a compelling story for our client, and ultimately they prevailed. So that's kind of healthcare in a nutcase. And our work also involves kind of issues around merger, issues around kind of intellectual property. Someone owns some technology and someone else steals the technology. Issues around kind of product liability. Maybe someone used a particular device, a particular drug, and they got harmed. And so, they bring suit because of that. And so just kind of a whole gamut, the whole range of cases that involve healthcare and our expertise within that context.
Great. Thank you, Atan, for sharing. So I think next, Melina, would you like to briefly talk about the internship program?
Yes, we have quite a few attendees tonight who are interested in our internship program, which is geared toward candidates who expect to complete their degrees in the year following the internship. Students have to be enrolled in an academic program while they do the internship, which is typically a 10 to 12-week internship between early June and early August. We invest a lot of time and effort to make this program a valuable experience for our interns, and our major goals tend to be threefold. First, we want to give you an opportunity to step in the shoes of a real AG consultant and experience the work life and the social life of the company as fully as possible. So to that end, through the AG internship, you get to work on real cases. You are staffed onto at least one case team where you can make tangible contributions, and your responsibilities are similar, if not equivalent, to those of full-time associates and full-time analysts. And I hope some of the examples that our panelists shared of what those might be in the context of different types of healthcare work gives you a good idea of what you might be involved in as an intern. Interns also go through a training, as you can see here on this slide, a typical progression for the program training that is very similar to the training that we offer full-time associates and analysts, even though it's compressed in the several weeks. And interns are assigned to formal mentors or have assigned formal mentors and advisors, mirroring the process for full-time employees. Last but not least, they go through a midsummer and end of summer performance review process, which is quite similar to that for full-time employees. So our second goal is for you to experience the firm as a whole as much as possible. While through your casework, you may only get to focus on one practice area or one type of case within a practice area. We want you to learn about AG and the many exciting practice areas that the firm has. So you'll be invited to firm-wide events that share an overview of these and feature cases from a variety of these areas. And last,
Oh, I think Milena, you're on mute now.
oh, I'm sorry. I don't know how that happened. So the last, but not least, we want the internship to be a great opportunity for you to build your network, to form close relationships with fellow interns, as well as colleagues in different levels of the organization, including our partners who are very invested in the intern program. So on our next slide, we have an outline for our application process. For the internship, you are going to apply as for any other position at AG through our careers website listed here, and there might be slight variations in the exact requirements for each position, but we do require a resume or CV for each of them and a cover letter. Some of them require an official transcript as well. You do see the deadlines listed here for the different types of internship positions for the healthcare team as HEOR practice, as well as for the litigation. Some are associates. We do review applications on a rolling basis. So the earlier you submit your application, probably the more choices in terms of office locations you will have. So encouraging you to submit as early as you're ready to present a really strong application. And we look forward to reviewing that with the team internally, and hopefully, candidates advance through a first round interview process. Those who are selected for final rounds tend to have those final rounds in person. And we make decisions usually within 2 to 4 weeks from the start of the initial interview of a candidate. So with that, this was in a nutshell the application process, and I'm happy to answer more questions after the event. But we have about 10 minutes to go through your questions, and I know many of those were submitted, so we'll head into the moderated Q&A.
Perfect. Thank you, Milena. So I do see a lot of questions already flew in. So let's start from one question related to EPI work. So the question is, how much of the EPI work consists of conducting literature reviews? I think this might be a broader question, but Amaral, would you like to address that question?
Sure. So we do quite a bit of epidemiologic work here. And I think the thing to remember is that epidemiology touches like all aspects of the work that we do. So study design and epi methods, the biases that you need to think about when you're designing a study, when you're designing a statistical analysis, we think about that on almost every HEOR study, every quantitative HEOR study. And I bet Kai, if we ask you about the strategy, you're also thinking about, how confounding and how selection bias would impact certain studies and how that could certain studies that would then be part of the strategy and all of that. So I think that, yeah, go ahead, Kai.
Oh, yeah, that I agree. Yeah, it is a part of a lot of the work that we do. But the way I would look at it is basically supporting a lot of the other projects, because you don't want to go into a project without understanding how the evidence looks, because you might end up basically reinventing the wheel, which is what we don't want.
Yeah. So that's on the strategy side. And so I think, you know, an epi background and epi knowledge and epi skill sets are relevant to almost every single study that we do.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Moral and Kai. So next question. So do you also conduct researches on international settings, not just focus on the US? So I can take a first pass on that question. So yeah, here we conduct studies not only just focus on US, we have a global perspective. I think for most of the study types that we just presented, we usually have both ex-US and US studies. For example, database analyses. Of course, we have a lot of claims data, EHR data options in the US, but we also have studies using like EHR or claims data from Europe, from Asia and different countries. And similarly, for the primary data collection type of work, we routinely conduct different type of chart review and surveys, collaborating with different medical centers globally. So yeah, we focus on both US and ex-US studies. The next question. So are associates assigned to a particular case type area, or can they get experience on different types of cases? For example, both EPI and HEOR. I wonder who would like to take that question?
I can take that one too. So as you heard from a lot of us that, for instance, Yan and I were in the same program at UCLA, right? So we're trained in epidemiology, but we came here and we do a lot of HEOR. So I think you're not assigned a specific type of study. So AG has what we call an internal labor market, which means that the more work you do and the more folks know your work and the more you build your reputation, the more likely you are to be approached for new studies. It also means that you get to be selective about the types of projects that you work on, because if the greater demand that folks have for your work, for you to be part of their team, the more selective you can be about the types of projects that you work on. So I think the answer to the question is we don't assign folks to teams. The beauty of AG is you can develop skill sets in all sorts of areas based on the work that you do, and you can be selective about, you can choose to work on specific types of projects.
Great, thank you, Moral. So the next question is related to the training and the advising and mentorship that we got from working on cases in AG. So I wonder if Debbie or Atan, you can comment based on your own experience related to trainings and mentorship you received while working here.
Sure, I can get started. So I think AG is really nice because when you first join, there are a lot of formal trainings. So to make sure that you're up to speed in terms of technical skills, like we use, or at least in HEOR, we use SAS and R quite a lot. And when I joined, I did not know either of those. From coming from an econ background, I was very, very good at STATA. But so we had SAS trainings, we had healthcare specific trainings, we have some trainings on soft skills. And then in addition, there's a lot of on-the-job training. So when you're new, you get assigned to a case team, and people know that you're new, and they're going to take the time to walk you through what are the steps, explaining like what some of the terminology is, what do you have to do, so you really understand sort of what's expected of you in terms of the tasks that you're given and how to progress through them. There's also broader mentorship. So when you first join, you're assigned a peer mentor. So someone who is the same level as you, but who's been here a year or two, and can kind of talk to you, is sort of like your buddy, to talk you through any question you have, no matter how big or small. Like, where do I go for lunch? What am I supposed to wear? What do I do if I'm having trouble with something, if I can't get my SAS code to run? whatever it is, your peer mentor can be like your first stop. And then you're also assigned an advisor who's someone sort of 1 or 2 levels above you who helps to guide your career. So there's someone who you can talk to if you say, I want to try an epi case or a regulatory case, but I'm not sure where to get started with that. So they can help you direct you to the right people to talk to. If you're not sure about sort of where to go with your career, if you're having trouble with something, your advisor is kind of your go-to person for bigger questions. And the nice thing is that, so the peer mentorship, it officially ends after you've been here for a year, but often the peer mentorship relationship just continues because you become close and it becomes someone that you're used to talking to. The advisor relationship continues throughout your career at AG. So you always have a sort of person to talk to get advice from, and who also helps with your feedback and reviews and other things. But yeah, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that was that covers it all.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you, Debbie. So I know that we're almost at time, probably 30 seconds before 7. So I wonder, Milena, should we, unfortunately, I know that we haven't gone through all the questions. Should we wrap up now?
Yes, thank you, Jan, and thank you everyone for your excellent presentations and for the responses to our attendees and for the rich discussion. Unfortunately, we are not able to answer all the questions we received. However, we want to offer these channels for our prospective candidates to follow up with the recruiting team, and hopefully we'll be able to provide you with answers. We also recommend that you explore the websites listed here for more information about any positions that are open, as well as the experience within the healthcare practice or our summer internship. So with that, I want to thank all of our panelists as well as our attendees for the excellent event, and we look forward to staying in touch with all of the attendees, and thank you so much for your interest in Analysis Group.